What if your greatest strength isn't what you've overcome, but what you're willing to reveal? In this powerful episode of My Resilience Reveal, our guest, Marcus Alvarado, opens up in a way that will stop you in your tracks. He shares the deeply personal story of losing his veteran Marine best friend to PTSD and suicide. This is a conversation rooted in loyalty, heartbreak, and the kind of resilience most people never talk about out loud. This isn't just a story, it's a wake-up call. From their unbreakable high school bond to the devastating loss that changed everything, Marcus takes you inside the emotions so many carry in silence: guilt, grief, and the longing to keep someone's legacy alive. But more importantly, he brings light to what truly matters: seeking help, building real support systems, and creating safe spaces where people feel seen, heard, and not alone. Tune in, feel free to share it. This is a podcast. It's more than that, though. It's a conversation that can change a life. Hi, everybody. Welcome to My Resilience Reveal with Lisa Sinnott. I am so excited to introduce you today to Marcus Alvarado. He has got an incredible resilient life story with a very dear friend of his, Paul Wedgwood. So we're just going to jump into it. Marcus, again, thank you so much for coming on. I've been looking forward to this.
My pleasure. I'm so excited to talk to you and connect with you on this level, Lisa. I'm just so excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about Paul. So what was it that made your friendship so meaningful in your life? How old were you guys when you met? Tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, so Paul Wedgwood was my best friend. We met the first day of high school. Again, one of the more impressionable times of someone's life is high school, right? It's like the first time where you get a little bit of semblance of independence in life and you're kind of trying to find yourself as a young adult, at least becoming an adult at the end of the senior year of high school. But this was freshman year when I met Paul Wedgwood, and we connected real quick. We actually liked the same girl at one point, and he got the girl, and that got me kind of upset. But that's kind of how this whole friendship started, because we had to hang out together. So I was just like the best friend of the girl. He was the boyfriend of the girl. And so by virtue of that, we were forced to hang out. And I mean, quickly just became super, super close. We were both very much more leaders of a group. And so we butted heads on that side of things too as well. But like quickly, when I connected with him, I knew there was something special about him, because he was so much more than someone just trying to be cool. He was somebody who wanted to connect with me on a more emotional level as we were kind of growing up together. And yeah, just similar personalities, a lot of the same things that we liked at the time. And then we were both athletes at the time. So this was at Pine Creek High School on the northern part of Colorado Springs, which back then there was really nothing around over there, just a bunch of farmland and Black Forest area over there. And just struck up a friendship, and it lasted all the way through the entire lifespan of Paul. So that's who he was. That's what he meant to me. And it started in high school.
Wow. So he joined the Marines, right?
Yep.
So, and he did unfortunately commit suicide, and PTSD is a really real thing. So we're just going to kind of do a deep dive into this. So what really impacted your life when you found out that Paul had taken his life, both, personally, emotionally, all the things? What happened with Marcus?
Oh, man. So, there's so much to unpack with that, right? Because, there was so much that led up to that. Because we graduated 7 years before he took his own life. For one, when he did join the Marines, he was like basically a 4.0 student, decided to drop out of school, then join the Marines, then realized the Marines require a diploma. So hopped back in school a semester before we were supposed to graduate, and graduated early, all within within 3 weeks. So very spontaneous decision for him to make, but it was something that he took on very proudly, especially as he joined the Marines. So he graduated technically before us, even though he dropped back into another school and graduated and joined the Marine Corps. But like the whole time, he was extremely proud to be a Marine, to have a brotherhood with the Marine Corps. This is during the Afghanistan time.
Mhm.
So this is like 2010 to 2015 time frame when he was deployed out there. And when he came back, obviously, I think it's a challenge for a lot of the veterans nowadays to adjust to a lifestyle that's very different than war overseas. And I feel like they become invisible to our world just because there's a lot of people who here in the US don't know exactly what's going on over there, what's taken place over there, or what they've actually been through over there. So there's really hard for those folks to connect back into society. So again, when he got out of the Marines in 2013, I know I got my timelines mixed up a little bit there, but he got out in 2013. It was a challenge for him. He connected with a lot of veterans, and he was actually that strong person for those veterans. He was a point of strength for a lot of people, including myself. And, that's how we both were as friends. We were strong points for each other. Like that's who he was in the Marine Corps. He was that guy to go to help folks get through things. And so when he ended up taking his own life, it was a very big challenge for me just because he was someone who was so strong, someone who leaned on me. At that point in our friendship, it was a little bit fractured based off a couple things that might have happened due to his PTSD. More specifically, when I graduated college, during that time, he didn't come to my graduation and we didn't speak for like a year and a half. And we actually reconciled before he lost his life because he just told me that PTSD was so bad that where he was living in Fort Collins, Colorado, he just didn't have it in him to travel that far down to Colorado Springs. And as you know, Lisa, that's not very far. It's only
No, yeah.
with no traffic. So it broke me in a lot of ways. It broke my heart, but it also broke my mind because this is a person where we had a brotherhood. It's the first guy I ever said I love you to. That wasn't my father or my brother, because we had such a deep tie. Obviously, when he was in the Marine Corps, we didn't know if he would come back from war. So we wanted to make sure that we communicated as best as we could about our feelings towards one another as friends, because anything could happen. So it
Right.
broke my mind. We talked about growing old and him getting out of the Marines and what life would look like as we got older, as friends, as best friends. And so all those mixed emotions were really all at once for me, but also as a person myself personally, I don't necessarily feel emotions especially as a man. I feel like I have a numbing factor that's kind of my defense mechanism as a man. So I feel those feelings maybe a month or two after the fact. Um,
Right.
yeah, it was really challenging. There was a lot of guilt also associated with it too, as well, because I was the person that he went to when he was going through hard times, whether it was before the Marines or during or after the Marines, I was that guy for him. So there's a lot of guilt that I wasn't there that last, say, year and a half that he was alive.
But you did reconcile,
Yeah,
right? Do you think that was you hear that very commonly with people who are about to commit suicide, where they go back and they reconcile with a lot of people. Do you think that was a pre-planned thing? Was it pretty soon thereafter or
that's such a great question. And, I've actually had that come up a few years ago and had to really think through that because it was
Mhm.
a mutual friend was doing something and he happened to be in town and I happened to be there. So I was still a little salty as one would be, as his
Yeah.
best friend was invited to his graduation. He didn't come. But I do think that was the case, Lisa. I think he was there and he pulled me aside and told me like intentionally that, this is why I couldn't come. In fact, I tried to come, he said, down and he had to get all of his service dogs in the car with him and he just couldn't do it. And
Wow.
that was amazing to hear at the time. I was still a little upset at the time, but I was also younger and just didn't understand what was going on. And maybe that was the moment that he was kind of reconciling before, he decided to do what he did. Yeah, I think so. I really do. I know, when he took his life, he had a BAC, blood alcohol content of like zero point 0.4, zero point 0.5. So severely above the legal limit, multiple times over the legal limit of drinking. And so whether that was planned or whether it was kind of a spur of the moment kind of thing, I don't know. But I do know Paul and myself, no matter what fight we were ever in, and we were in a lot of fights as kids and fist fights and all this crazy stuff, he always came back to me. Always. I mean, and that's just so strange, especially like young men coming and circling back to each other and saying sorry after fights is very, it's not very normal. That's who he was. In fact, he was always the bigger man over me for coming back and saying, hey, we shouldn't have done that. Like, this is where I was coming
Oh,
from with the fight. And, I'm sorry. So he was very mature beyond his years to even do that.
yeah.
And I think it does make a lot of sense that he would apologize anyways before he did anything.
So how did you tackle the guilt and that overwhelm?
That's a hard question. It took years, Lisa, to tackle that because for me, as someone who was a leader of my friends, especially at that time when they were looking up for me to be kind of a leader and be strong in the moments. For Paul, like I helped plan his service at the park that we did his service at, and garner the whole team around when we spoke at the funeral, and just be that strong person. For a long time, I had the guilt of any of my friends from that group, and we were kind of a ragtag, degenerate group of people that were just ridiculous in our time. But to lose any of them, whether it was another suicide or just losing touch with them, was a very, very challenging thing that I could not do for a long time. I could not move on from any friend of that time frame because I was afraid. I was afraid that something else would happen and I would feel guilty again for not being there for those group of friends. So it took me a long time. And as you know, as a business person, like, you do sometimes have to transcend different circles that you're in,
Yes.
because it's important to you for your growth. And so I would say it took me 6 years to really understand how to do that and not have guilt to walk away from situations that weren't good for me. And then I started to understand, in that whole mix of things, it's like me and Paul, we needed the boundaries that we had with one another and the distance between one another. It is what it is, and it happened, and I have to be okay with that. Because I can't be there for every little thing that happens in someone's life too, as well. That's not fair to put on me when it's someone else's decision, and the decision that he made ultimately was obviously a sad one, but
Right.
it took me a long time, Lisa, to get there.
Yeah, I mean, mental health is such a big issue today, and suicide, especially among men and veterans, of course, as well. But what's the big messaging you would like to share with people on if they have a friend who has PTSD? Let's just start with that. Do you have any advice for them?
Yeah. Get involved with folks if they have a friend who has PTSD, have that friend get involved with folks who also have PTSD and build a support group around that. I've been involved in so many nonprofits since then who are more focused on veterans suffering from PTSD, and the camaraderie built around that veterans can only understand their brothers in arms is very
Yeah.
true. And they help each other because they've been through some of the same things. It's the same thing as trauma bonding, right? It's what you have
Yes.
to do to get through these things. And also, these men, they have a hard time asking for help because usually they're leaders, they're leaders of leaders, but have them understand the humility of life. You went through what you went through and you did what you did. And to live with the guilt that these people often live with, especially veterans, is very tough. And the only way to tackle that is to go through it with people who have been through it as well and maybe been on the other side of that. I think in life that when you go through traumatic things or just bad things in general, you can stay there for your whole life. And we know people who just
Uh-huh.
victimize themselves in their life. And they kind of just go through this broken record cycle of they just can't get out of what happened to them. But if you have the strength to pull out or get the help to pull out of those situations, there's wisdom on the other side of that. There's so much wisdom. And when you have wisdom, you can help other people. So what you'll find is in these groups is there's people who are not necessarily beaten PTSD, but they have the tools now to help themselves and and they want to help others too as well. So
Okay.
that's kind of the system in place, and there's plenty of good ones. I linked up with Mattersville 7 years ago. They were a tiny house community that supported specifically veterans with PTSD, but there's plenty of other good ones in and around Southern Colorado too, or wherever your listeners are. And
Okay.
it helps so much, Lisa. And then, of course, on top of that, I always, and I told you this before, and you didn't know this, is I give away an award every year called the Paul Wedgwood Award, which is for veterans suffering from PTSD that,
All right.
that they honor courage, character, and strength in their community. And that can be through any, type of thing that they're doing. And I think that helps because it's like yeah, they have PTSD. Yeah, they've been through trauma, but it's something they can be proud of because, like my best friend, I keep his memory alive by
Yes.
celebrating veterans who are very strong and have the courage and strength to deal with what they're doing and do something better in their community.
Which is so awesome. I love that. So, how can people get involved with that? Do you have a way for them to contribute, or is it just a free award, or what does that look like?
So we do it through Mattersville vets.org. They're a friend of mine. They've been around for quite some time. They actually have a wolf sanctuary in Sedalia, Colorado. So a lot of the veterans, what they find is canine therapy. Obviously, wolves were canines or are canines. And so that's a good place to start. We usually give it to a veteran in helping out in that community, but we've given it through different stripes of people in Southern Colorado. They didn't even have to be part of Mattersville. I used to do it through my tiny house festival back in the day, which was super fun because we've given it to people who volunteered for my festival, people who worked for my festival. The very first year we did it, we actually broke the only rule, which is to do it to a veteran with PTSD. We gave it to Paul's mother, and that was just so special to
Yeah.
surprise her to do that because, mothers especially carry the burden heavier than anybody. And it
Yeah.
breaks my heart because it's one of those things that no one ever wants to know how that feels. But
Yeah.
folks are going through it all the time. 22 veterans a day commit PTSD suicide. And so it's a real issue in our community that we got to deal with.
So when did you realize that your story could help others?
It's interesting. Probably a couple different ways because my best way of grieving is by talking to people who have similar situations, but also keeping the memory of Paul alive. That's been a big piece for me to heal. And it's also healed other people too with PTSD suicide. For whatever reason, I was not a veteran, but I had a best friend who was a veteran who kept in touch with me a lot. So I know a lot that happened. There's a lot of books about what happened in the battles he was specifically in. And even though I'm not a veteran, I connect with veterans about it because they understand, and it's helped so many people get through it. And they feel like they know Paul personally when they walk away through those conversations with me, which is a really cool thing because, I'm not qualified to talk about war or anything like that. At least I'm not a veteran. I never enlisted or was an officer or anything like that. But there's been a lot of healing behind or around the conversations about Paul Wedgwood, just because how much I loved him. I think they see that. I think they understand that. I think they know his type of personality because it's probably similar to the personalities that they are used to in the military. And that has helped a lot of people just get through it, including myself. I mean, it's, like you say, you talk things out and you kind of self-heal as you talk through them.
Right, exactly. Well, and you are a very prominent businessman here in Colorado Springs, whom I'm honored to associate with. So let's talk about a little bit adversities in business, right? That you've had to overcome and push through, because the military goes through their own stuff too, but same in business. You want to give a couple examples of you pushing through?
Man, I've had so many instances, Lisa. What the heck? I have one that comes to mind. So my very first event that I ever did on my own with my own money was in 2018. And it was a tiny house festival. And it was at the Air Force Academy. And it was an amazing event because it was one of those things where I pushed all my chips in and I was young. I was singles. I didn't have a lot to lose at that point. It's just one of those moments in life where you don't have there's only certain moments as you move through life where you have that much time to kind of risk it all for something like that. And that's what I did. And the very last hour of that event, we're getting ready to close it up. Successful event. I was super excited to kind of celebrate with my family. An accident happened. And as we know in Colorado, but especially on the Front Range or even, somewhere like the Air Force Academy, wind is very high. And
Yes.
what happened was one of our vendor tents who sponsored our event, it was a big old tent that was in front of the stage. It was one of those tension tents where they have the poles going all the way up it and then they kind of tie the tent around it. As you see
Yes.
from DIA, like those really cool tension tents.
Yep.
One of the main poles fell down and it hit somebody in the head and
Oh,
it nearly killed them. In fact, in the moment, I thought it might have actually killed the person. And
my goodness.
I will never forget the wind going out my sails like I've never experienced in my life. Because I thought I was in kind of the home stretch there. And here we are right before our final live music performance of the night. And I think it was Wirewood Station actually was supposed to perform.
Oh, wow.
We had a caution tape out the whole area and no one can go into that tent area where the stage was. And I was like, let's just close the event down. I give up. It's been great, but I got into this to make people feel better and to have something that they can be, celebrating with one another with. I wasn't getting into this to get anybody hurt or anything of that sort. So it just took so much out of me. And my main coordinator with me at the time, she was like my second in command. She's like, you're going to stand up and we're going to do this. We're going to put this under a canopy, Wirewood Station under a canopy and just do the music that way. Don't worry about it. We're going to do this and we're going to finish this strong. So that's probably the first time in my career where someone picked me up when I didn't think I can go further because I was so devastated by something that happened in my event that was actually beyond my control. And, years later, became obviously different types of things legally, but it ended up being an okay situation. And one of those things where you just don't expect as a business owner to go through. Like you think maybe you'll lose some money or someone gets mad and leaves a bad Google review, but you don't expect for someone to get hurt. And so that was really challenging for me to get through. But once I did get through it, again, the wisdom phase, I was able to really help people who did events or did anything where there was a high risk of failure where, potentially there's other things at risk beyond just losing money. So that was one that I'm so glad I did go through at the end of the day. I don't want anybody to get hurt at the end of the day, but I am glad that I have been through something like that, because that really tested my will, Lisa, where I thought I was impenetrable. I was like, no, there's nothing that's ever going to, take me out or take me down, or, no one's ever going to need to lift me up. I'm always ready to go. But
Yeah.
that was a super challenging time.
Wow. How humbling was that too, though? But I'm sure it was refreshing to actually have someone strong enough to lean into for strength that day.
You kidding me? Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, if I didn't have those folks there, I would have given up. So the
Mm.
gal was named Stacy Packer. She's awesome. She was a big community person back in the day in Colorado Springs area, and I mean, without her, I don't know what I would have done. I know it would have been something where I don't know if I probably would have closed it down early and just try to figure it out. But it's good. We all need people at the end of the day for us. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're Paul Wedgwood or Marcus Alvarado who thinks that we're strong enough to hold the whole world together. We all need people at the end of the day. None
That's
of
right.
us are too strong to take on the world by ourselves.
Right. Exactly. So if Paul were sitting here today on this podcast, what do you think he would say to contribute to this conversation?
I think Paul would be happy with what I've been able to do with my business career. I've always had that side of me where I've wanted to do business. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, even when we were young kids. So I think he'd be proud of the things that I've been able to accomplish. I think he'd probably be involved in a lot of those things too, because he was so smart, Lisa. And he had like an adult sense of humor when we were like 14. Some of the jokes I'll tell now when we're 14 to my friends are like, what? A 14-year-old said that? I'm like, yeah. So he had a very awesome way of taking on life and taking on hard things that he can bring humor into the mix. And so I know that like my life would have that peace filled, right? Like when we lose people, we do have a piece of us that die. So, if Paul was here, I'd definitely have that piece of fulfillment of having him around. But I just think he'd be happy to be here. I think he'd be on the other side of not necessarily PTSD, but through the traumas and working on it. Because again, trauma is one of those things you got to work on it. We don't ever necessarily get over trauma. We just kind of have to work through and have the tools available to us to combat them whenever they resurface. Unfortunately, that's what we have to do as human beings. So I think he'd
True.
be super well rounded, super into therapy and helping himself and bettering himself, because that's the type of person he was. And he'd probably be here with me. He'd probably be, like my Frank I'd be his Lisa to his Frank or whatever it would
Yeah.
be, maybe co-hosting
Right.
things. I think that's how it would be.
Wow. So, in closing, I'd like you to talk to our listeners who some may be feeling guilt, remorse, or some might have suicidal ideations or battling all sorts of mental health issues that I just won't name. What's your message of resilience to them?
I've had a lot of friends who have taken their life. Paul's not the only one. And I think when you're in that phase of life, it is so challenging to get outside of your own thinking. And so it is so mission critical to seek help, more than likely seek professional help to help yourself. Because when you're in that phase, most things your friends and closest people say might not even help you. And so like the professional help is always the first tier to that. And then just getting around people that you can trust, that are going to be able to be around you when you're most vulnerable. A lot of us don't want to show the most vulnerable sides of ourselves. But what I've found in business or in life or anything, that has to be shown to the right people, but it needs to be shown. It's so important. After this experience, I have no problem shedding tears around my friends or anything, because at the end of the day, we're humans and we do human things, and we shouldn't be ashamed of any of those things. And so getting a really good tribe that you can count on, they can be vulnerable around and who won't exploit that. So have discernment for those pieces. But also, like, if it comes down to it, like, definitely seek the professional help that's necessary. And there are resources out there. And there are people who've been through the situation that you're likely going through, anybody who's listening to this, and it can help you and have been on the other side of that. And so that's kind of my little pieces of advice.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. There you have it, everyone. Marcus Alvarado himself sharing from the heart. And I appreciate all that you're doing with the veterans, and that award for Paul is just amazing. And it's once a year, right?
Once a year. And this year is the 10th anniversary of us losing Paul. So we're going to do
Oh,
something special with some of the friends and fly some of them in, and his mom's flying in, and his dog that was there the night that he passed is going to, we'll see if we were able to get his dog here too, but we're getting everybody together, and we'll do something special for the award with all of them around. So it should be good.
Oh, that's so great. Well, again, thank you so much, Marcus, for coming on and sharing. I'm sure other people will glean from all of the things that you shared.
Thank
Thanks.
you.